let's just quickly go through this sociology as a science. I'm just going to try and do it in two parts. If it goes over 5 minutes, it's just easier to upload. So firstly, going back to the argument, during the Enlightenment period, 1850 plus, modernisation happened. And during this time, as we know through Weber, everyone wanted everything to be scientific. Rationalisation, superstition was poo-pooed. Everything was extremely negative if you were talking about anything that wasn't science. And during that time, Comte, who was a functionalist, decided to call sociology a science, and wanted to study society scientifically. Marx followed suit, as did Durkheim, and they both followed positivism, as you can see on the chart. Now, positivists model sociology on logic and methods used by natural sciences, biology, chemistry, all of that sort of stuff. They want experiments, they want quantitative data, and we looked at all of quantitative data. So any of those things that give you empirical facts, studying large groups, that it's reliable, you're able to create, you're able to replicate the findings in the studies. That's all scientific data, okay? Positivism is therefore theoretical, and it's value free. So it's all about being really, really objective and neutral, observing, can you see their natural phenomena, identifying, measuring patterns, creating facts. And as Durkheim said, social facts exist over and above individuals, and they shape human behaviour. So this is sociology, really. One side of sociology is all the quantitative positivist stuff. Then you've got the other side of sociology, which is the anti-positivist interpretive stuff. And this is all the social action theorists, ethnomethodology, phenomenology. All of these theories believe that sociology cannot be a science. They reject the idea that we can use logical methods to study science. They want valid data. Validity means truthfulness in the sense of in-depth meanings and motives. You looked at this when you studied Husserl, when you studied Schutz, when you studied Cicero, all of the people that you've studied. These are the people that look at sociology and how sociology cannot ever be a science, okay? Or they don't believe it can be a science because of free will. One of these things, ethnomethodologists, for example, also believe that, it's all about it exists in the mind. So that goes to show that actually individuals believe that sociology, that individuals have their own meanings and motives, and therefore one cannot study sociology in a scientific format, in a scientific way. So moving on from that, let's have a little consideration. So remember, in your exam question, you're going to have to look at one side positivism, the other side anti-positivism. Positivists believe sociology can be a science. Anti-positivists believe that sociology cannot be a science. So some of that's going to formulate your argument. Now, what some of you are a little bit confused about is the whole argument about Popper. Okay, so Karl Popper, basically thought that all academic subject areas wanted to be called a science, and they should. And if they wanted to be called a science, so if you want to be a science, he said that you've got to subject yourself to something called a process of falsification. Now, falsification is basically, you've got to prove something wrong. Remember that. So in order for sociology to be a science and to test itself, you need to have a hypothesis. For example, suicide is caused by insufficient regulation and integration. That could be a hypothesis that needs to be tested. And then you've got the idea there of Karl Popper rejected Marxism, for example, as a pseudoscience because its concepts such as false class consciousness were too abstract to be seen and measured. So Popper thought that certain sociologists or parts of sociology was not scientific. I mean, how do you measure false class consciousness? That's really difficult. Now, that would be an ideal thing for you to write in terms of an evaluative point. Now, Popper, wasn't for or against the idea of sociology as a science. He said that if sociology wanted to be a science, those sociologists have to try and prove their theory wrong at all times. They've got to try and falsify their theory at all times. So then you've got this idea, Popper continuing, he talked about the deductive method and the inductive method. So you've got to start with the theory, And so the deductive method says the theory then is bombarded with challenges to its hypothesis, and then you've got to try and make it stand up to those pretty awful claims, if you like. They've got to try and stand up to it. The inductive method starts with a theory, then finds evidence to prove itself right. Okay? So you're trying constantly to try and prove something right. You like your theory. So Popper talked about the idea that actually you've got to really, if you want your claim to have any standing in society, you've got to put it through some rigor. And that rigor comes through falsification. The inductive method doesn't. It's all about let's find evidence to prove things right. And do you remember I said in class, I talked about the bell curve. Now, the bell curve was done by scientists, and it was a theory that was apparently scientific to prove that black people were not as intelligent as white people. Now, that was conducted in 1994 by Harvard University and Charles Murray, a combination, and that was funded by a neo-Nazi group. So science can actually not really be that scientific. Part 1 over.